There's a plant growing wild across 38 states. It has 3 times the protein of potatoes. It saved starving pilgrims in 1621. And yet today, it's classified as a weed, sprayed with poison, and forgotten by nearly everyone in America. Why? Because this plant doesn't need fertilizer. It grows back every year. It feeds people without permission. And that makes it dangerous. This isn't just a story about food, it's a story about power, erasure, and the survival of something too self-sufficient to be controlled. The question is, who buried it? And why? The year was 1621. The Mayflower had landed, but it wasn't a triumph, it was a catastrophe. Half the settlers were already dead, wiped out by cold, disease, and starvation. The rest were desperate, clinging to survival in a foreign land with no food, no experience, and no backup. Then came the Wampanoag. They didn't just offer kindness, they offered knowledge. And with it, a strange tuber pulled from the banks of nearby rivers. It wasn't a potato. It wasn't corn. It was something else entirely. Something wild, yet cultivated. Something the settlers had never seen, but would owe their lives to. They learned to dig it, cook it, live off it. That one plant, introduced by native hands, may have been the only reason the Plymouth colony didn't vanish completely. And when they gathered for the first Thanksgiving, it wasn't turkey that fed them, it was this. A plant so powerful, so nutritious, it was worshipped for centuries. Its name? The groundnut, a native superfood with 3 times the protein of potatoes. So how did this miracle crop go from life-saving staple to outlawed obscurity? That's where the story turns dark. The colonists didn't just adopt the groundnut, they depended on it. After barely surviving their first winter, they returned to the river banks again and again, digging up the tubers that native tribes had shown them how to find, how to cook, how to live on. But gratitude didn't last. By 1654, everything changed. The same plant that had fed them was now forbidden. A new town ordinance made it illegal for Native Americans to dig up groundnuts on English-claimed land, land that had, for thousands of years, been theirs. The punishment? Public stocks for the first offense. A whipping for the second. Let that sink in. The colonists took the land. They took the food system. Then they passed laws to criminalize the very people who had shown them how to survive. This wasn't about protecting property. This was deliberate erasure, a systematic theft of indigenous knowledge and sovereignty. The message was clear. We'll take what you know. But if you try to keep it, we'll punish you for it. And yet, the groundnut persisted. It continued to grow, just as it always had, quietly, powerfully, in the shadows. But its place on the American table was already beginning to vanish. And what replaced it was no accident. For a while, the groundnut survived, not just in the wild, but in settler kitchens. Colonists boiled it, roasted it, even ground it into flour. They gave it names like Indian potato and potato bean. It was a staple, cheap, nourishing, and everywhere. But over time, something shifted. By the 1800s, groundnut had become too associated with native culture and poverty. It didn't fit the image of progress. It wasn't European. It wasn't refined. So, slowly, it was pushed out, not because it failed as food, but because it didn't align with the future industrial America wanted. The nail in the coffin? The rise of industrial agriculture. Groundnut didn't play by the new rules. It was perennial, no need to replant every year. It fixed its own nitrogen, no fertilizer required. It reseeded itself, no need to buy seeds. And it couldn't be easily harvested by machines, it grew in tangled vines, underground. To big agriculture, that wasn't a feature. It was a threat. You can't build a business model around self-sufficiency. You can't profit off a plant that doesn't need you. So instead, they chose the European potato, easier to control, easier to commodify, easier to sell. groundnut was cast aside, labeled primitive, forgotten. But behind that disappearance was something far more strategic. Because if people could feed themselves without inputs, without chemicals, without seed companies or systems, they wouldn't need any of it. By the mid-20th century, groundnut had all but vanished from America's consciousness. But in 1985, something unexpected happened. At Louisiana State University, two researchers, Dr. William Blackmon and Dr. Berthal Reynolds, quietly launched one of the most ambitious domestication programs in U.S. agricultural history. Their mission? To bring the groundnut back, not just as a relic, but as a commercial crop that could rival the potato. They collected over 200 wild specimens from 19 states. They crossbred them into 2,200 hybrid lines. They created varieties with bigger tubers, tighter clusters, faster yields. Some plants produced over 3 pounds of food each, without fertilizer, without replanting, without chemicals. One cultivar, LA85034, stood out. High yield. Strong resistance. Perfect for modern farming. The project was working. It was proving that groundnut could be not just viable, but revolutionary. And then, the funding vanished. Almost overnight, the program was shut down. Dr. Blackmon retired. The hybrids were shelved. No seeds were released to the public. No explanation. No continuation. Just silence. Decades of potential, deleted. And this wasn't a one-off. Groundnut wasn't the only native crop abandoned like this. Programs for sunchoke, pawpaw, pimmon, and others have all faced the same fate. Why? Because they all share the same trait. They grow too well. They require no inputs. No chemical dependency. No seed subscription. Which means no recurring revenue. This wasn't a scientific failure. It was an economic decision, a quiet kill to protect the system. But while institutions let it die, one country across the ocean saw its true value. While America erased the groundnut from its fields, its memory, and its food systems, another country quietly gave it a second life. Japan. Sometime between 1868 and 1912, during the Meiji era, the Japanese were introduced to Apios americana, the very same plant native to North America that colonists once outlawed and researchers later abandoned. They didn't dismiss it. They didn't call it primitive. They didn't label it a weed. Instead, they named it Hodo, cultivated it, and wove it into their food culture. Small farms began growing it. Grocery stores started stocking it. Restaurants served it as a delicacy, nutty, sweet, hearty, and deeply nourishing. In the US, it was forgotten. In Japan, it became respected. There's even a legend in Aomori Prefecture. A mother gives her daughter a handful of small tubers on her wedding day, whispering that they should be planted by the garden fence. Not just for tradition, but because they would quietly feed her during pregnancy, when she'd be too tired to tend the larger garden. It wasn't just food. It was security. Passed on through generations, not by systems, but by stories. And here and Apo's, the twist that stings. Japan succeeded without large-scale industrial farming, without heavy subsidies, without genetically modifying the plant. They simply recognized its value, and respected its origins. Meanwhile, back in the United States, where the plant is native, it's still classified as a weed. Still sprayed with herbicides. Still unknown to 99% of the population. How did we get from survival crop, to criminalized food, to national amnesia? Maybe the better question is, who benefits from that forgetfulness? Because what's inside this plant reveals exactly why it was never meant to be forgotten. You've heard the history. The betrayal. The erasure. But here's the part they really didn't want you to know. The groundnut isn't just another root vegetable. It's not just some forgotten tuber from a time long gone. It's a nutritional powerhouse, so potent, So let's ask the obvious. Why isn't this in every grocery store? Why aren't we taught about this in school? Why is something this powerful still labeled a weed, and sprayed with poison? Because the groundnut breaks the rules. It doesn't just feed people. It heals. It empowers. It grows back without help. And most importantly, it doesn't make anyone rich. You can't patent it. You don't need fertilizer. You don't even need to buy seeds again. That's not just inconvenient for the system. That's dangerous to it. And the deeper you dig into its story, the more deliberate the suppression becomes. By now, the pattern is undeniable. A plant that saved lives. That grows without chemicals. That heals the body and restores the soil. Wasn't just forgotten. It was buried. On purpose. Because the groundnut does something most crops don't. It threatens the business model. Modern agriculture isn't designed to feed people. It's designed to sell products. Seeds, fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, year after year. Control the inputs, control the food. Control the food, control the people. But groundnut? You plant it once, it comes back every year. It fertilizes the soil naturally, no chemicals needed. It requires no replanting, no synthetic boosters, no dependence. That's not a crop. That's food independence. And in a system built on dependency, independence is the enemy. That's why breeding programs like LSU's are defunded. That's why perennials like groundnut, sunchoke, pawpaw, and pimmon vanish from public view. They're too resilient. Too accessible. Too unprofitable. Today, Iowa State University holds the largest collection of groundnut cultivars. But even there, research is slow, commercial funding is non-existent. There are no subsidies. No big AG endorsements. No rollout plans. Because there's nothing to sell. Only freedom to grow. Meanwhile, farmers in the Pacific Northwest are told to spray groundnut with herbicides, destroy it before it spreads. The same plant that once fed starving settlers. Now labeled a nuisance. Even the University of Maine issued a bulletin saying the only good way to remove it is to eat it. Almost like they forgot that's what it was always meant for. This isn't neglect. It's structural suppression. Because if people could grow their own protein-rich food, without companies, without chemicals, without control, they wouldn't need the system at all. The system tried to erase it. Tried to call it a weed. Tried to bury it in bureaucracy. Tried to drown it in herbicides and silence. But the groundnut refused to die. Today, it still climbs fences in forgotten backyards. It still snakes along riverbanks, quietly reclaiming the land that once fed nations. And in the shadows, a resistance grows. Across the U.S., small-scale growers, seed savers, and permaculture pioneers are fighting to bring the groundnut back. Not with billion-dollar funding, but with passion, preservation, and grit. Experimental Farm Network is cataloging rare varieties and protecting genetic diversity. Small seed companies are quietly offering tubers descended from the LSU breeding program, rescued from extinction by individuals who refuse to let the work die. And growers like Nat Bradford, the same man who revived the lost Bradford watermelon, have spent 15 years selecting and cultivating groundnut lines, one plant at a time. This isn't corporate agriculture. This is grassroots survival. No boardroom. No patent. No middleman. Just a community of people rediscovering something America tried to forget, a food that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't rely on chemicals, and doesn't play by the rules. It's not mainstream yet. But it's moving. And if it spreads far enough, the consequences could be massive. Because this plant doesn't end oppose, just offer calories. It offers a way out. Out of monoculture. Out of food dependency. Out of systems that put profit over people. And as climate chaos accelerates, as fertilizer costs soar, as soil collapses under synthetic pressure, groundnut waits. Quietly. Patiently. Ready to grow. The groundnut never vanished. We just stopped looking for it. It survived colonization. It survived criminalization. It survived being labeled a weed, sprayed with poison, and buried in silence. And still, it grows. Not because anyone told it to, but because it knows how. In a world where food comes wrapped in barcodes, and farming is owned by chemical giants, the groundnut is rebellion. It refuses to be controlled. It feeds people on its own terms. No seed packets. No fertilizers. No permission slips. Just sunlight, soil, and time. Maybe that's why it was buried, because it offers something that can and be bought. Freedom. So the next time someone says there's no alternative, no way to feed people without chemicals, debt, and dependency, remember this. There's a plant that's been doing it for thousands of years. It's still out there. It still works. And it's still waiting for someone to remember.